Shut up and sit down.
We're back with Matt Lepay on Inside Wisconsin. All right, so we should probably cover a little Badgers history here. Matt, you recently got to voice this promo that UW put out as Barry Alvarez retires after 31 years at UW. Talk about your relationship with Barry.
It was here from the beginning, right, with him when he stepped off the plane after helping Notre Dame win the Orange Bowl over Colorado, and was there for that first news conference when he told people, you better get your season tickets now because before long you might not be able to. And I remember looking around the room, and some of us were wondering, really? You know, they announced the crowd at that last game of the previous season at 23,000. In reality, it was closer to 10. So there were a lot of season tickets available. But, he came in full of energy and confidence. And as we said in the video, he felt real good about himself coming into Madison. And, hey, he did it. And he did it relatively quickly. By year 4, they won the league and went to the Rose Bowl and won it. But that first news conference, you're like, whoa, okay. Yeah, he certainly got the talk. But he changed everything, man. It went all business the minute he stepped on campus. And I know changing the culture sounds cliche, but he changed the culture. And he had great people around him. The chancellor, Donna Shalala, at the time, was critical. Pat Richter, the athletic director. And they said, Barry, do what you need to do. And he did it. It's just been one of the remarkable stories, I think. And I'm biased. I get it. But I still think it's one of the remarkable stories in college football, maybe ever, where the program was and what it became.
So you don't take over football until 1994. In 1988, when you're there and you're watching them go 1-10, and you're like, really I'm good with my Saturdays open right now. I'm fine.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there would be 30,000, 40,000 people. And the tough part was, and it was one of the things that we wanted to say in the video that we did for Barry a few weeks ago now, is that there were good players. Troy Vincent, Don Davey, and there were a lot of others. Dan Kissling, Todd Nelson, whose son now is an offensive lineman for the Badgers. The list does go on. Paul Christ, actually, my first year being around the program was his senior year. But there weren't enough of them. And it was right. Don Morton, Barry's predecessor, was here for 3 years, and they week in and week out, they were overmatched, and you knew really every week they had little, if any, chance to win. So the anger that was there for a while with the fan base became apathy, which is the very worst thing that you can have to deal with if you're any kind of a sports program, when people stop caring. But that was what happened. And when Alvarez came here, the first thing he really tried to do, beyond the obvious of getting good players, was getting fans to care again, giving them a reason to care again and come back to the stadium.
We remember Rose Bowl teams, we remember championship teams, but as teams go, do you remember teams by seniors, by groups that were more fun than other ones, whether they were successful or not? Like, give us some teams that you just really liked.
I'll jump ahead. I thought Barry's last season, the 2005 team, that was the defense went through some transition. It was ridiculously good the year before, and a lot of those guys had graduated, so they were a team that was going to have to win shootout type of games. But I appreciated that team. John Stocco, a tough, athletic quarterback. I think a better athlete than people gave him credit for. They had a tailback that year named Brian Calhoun, who was a Wisconsin guy, but he had played previously at Colorado and transferred into Madison. People knew he could run really well, but he was a tough runner, and he showed it that year. I would also go back and kind of jumping around here, the 96 team, which was Ron Dane's freshman year. And there were two guys all time that I can think of with Barry who just really didn't bother containing his excitement when he knew that they had landed a commitment from players. And Joe Thomas was one, and Ron Dane was the other. And that team had its ups and downs. It struggled in the Big Ten, but Ron was ridiculous. as a freshman. And Barry had a pretty good idea that he could be pretty good, but I'm not sure he thought he would be that good that fast. Those are a lot of characters too, John. Corey Raymer, who was a center on the Rose Bowl team, who was just a funny dude. Somebody did a story once on him. What would be your nickname? And Corey's answer was anything that starts with the word dumb. And but Corey was not dumb. He was not a dumb guy at all.
Right.
And you have a lot of guys like that who keep it fun.
So we were talking earlier about making you guys feel old, and I don't mean to do this now, but here we go. I was 5 years old when you started broadcasting for the Badgers, Matt.
Thanks.
You're all I've ever known. See ya. Yeah, it was good having you. Sorry.
Look who has hair and look who doesn't, Matt.
Yeah, right. I mean, mine's gray, but
full coverage. Full coverage. That's all we're saying, Trev.
Fluff the geese. Got it. So, all right. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. That's Wisconsin, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did a little research here. Ted Davis for the Bucks started in 1997. Wayne Larrivee, who we've had here on Inside Wisconsin, started with the Packers in 1999. The only person that's done this in Wisconsin longer than Matt Lepay, of course, is Bob Uecker, 1971. But 1988, and I bring that up because we got to go there. Matt, you graduated from Ohio State University. And here's what I love the most about when you talk about Ohio State. You refuse to call it the Ohio State University, which, as a fan, I really appreciate.
Wow. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, you can.
Didn't know that was an option.
Yeah, only if I get really angry at somebody. I went to the Harvard of Central Ohio, the Ohio State University. They say it just to annoy people, right? I mean,
it works.
Yeah, I'm sure Herb Street, when he's off the air, is doing that all the time, and Galloway, those guys. But they do it for annoyance. They do.
Listen, they chased Herbie out of there. They chased Herbie out of Columbus.
I know,
because on occasion he would say things that might be neutral or not flattering enough, and he's finally like, forget this, I'm going to Nashville.
He couldn't.
Like that's a hard fan base right there. When you do that, when you're like, dang, you ran him out, that is crazy. When they come through. But I tell you what, they got something roll. Camp Randall is terrific, right? But we could being in the shoe for game day is not terrible either.
No. I mean, I went there many times as a student there, and whenever the Badgers play there, which obviously with divisions and 14 teams in the league doesn't happen all the time. But yeah, I still try to let myself take it in, and I do the same thing at Michigan, at Penn State, the places where you get 100,000. But yeah, the horseshoe is. It's a lot of pomp and circumstance. And if you go there all the time, maybe you take it for granted a little bit. But if you're only there every so often, like I am now, yeah, I'll give myself a couple minutes to take it in, Script, Ohio, and all that fun stuff. I still admit that.
So given what you saw at Camp Randall in the late 80s to where it is now, do you take a minute to appreciate that every Saturday to go, wow, this, at least I'm here in the salad days? Yeah,
absolutely. And I think being an older guy like this, Trevor, you wouldn't know, but being an older guy was around when they weren't winning and most of the seats were empty. And when they played jump around at the end of the third quarter, our radio booth, we have the visitors radio booth just to our left. It's kind of fun to just take a glance over there and jump around because it does sway a little bit, the press box, when it gets going, and just to catch their reaction. I mean, as good as all the other traditions are, at least in the Big Ten, I still think jump around is the one that gets people wound up the most. And I'm not sure second place is all that close.
You guys could name drop a lot more than I could, but let me do one here quick. Brian Braum, former Packer, now with Purdue, good buddy of mine. His first trip to Camp Randall, he told us that they were in the press box and all the way over to the right, is my understanding, if you're looking at it. And we literally told him, hey, hang on to yourself when the jump around happens. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, you'll see. And sure enough, he texted us during jump around. He's like, I'm going to die. This thing's going down, right? Like, it's crazy how much it moves.
How much of that you get through your headsets when it gets going? If you're listening, or when it's just loud, or it's a big spot in a game, and those people get going, how much of that can you drink in while you're still calling the game?
Quite a bit. With radio, obviously, you can't lay out as much as you would for television. That's obvious, but I still let myself do it. If you get, if it's jump around, we'll play it. We'll come out of a commercial break and we'll just let it go. But if you get a big, if the defense is out there trying to get a big stop and it's 3rd and 10 or whatever it is, and the crowd gets cranked up, it's kind of fun to just let the crowd do its thing. And my broadcast partners, if it's Mark Tauscher or Mike Lucas, at times they'll just take off their headsets and just, they ignore me anyway, but they've got an excuse. They just take the headsets off and just really listen to the crowd get into it. It's hard you can't beat it. You can't beat, especially a big game atmosphere at Camp Randall, especially at night, I guess. But anytime, if a Michigan or an Ohio State, whatever, if there's a high stakes game and the crowd gets cranked up, we've all missed that a lot, of course, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get back to that this fall.
For sure. Tell me something about your basketball team that you like, because you've had 2 guys that really well, and now into guard. But between the span you had there, you saw a great wealth of growth and success in that area as well.
Yeah, it was but the first several years I was here, I was jealous of some of my colleagues, always going to the NCAA tournament. Don Fisher, who's been a long time radio voice at Indiana, going back to the Bob Knight days, the national titles, the Final Fours, and always wondered what it would be like to be around a team that actually got into the NCAA tournament, because that was a 47-year drought before Stu Jackson's team got him in 94. But to see what Dick Bennett and Bo Ryan and what Greg Gard is doing now, the sustained success. I know Barry Alvarez talked about that a lot. It's one thing to get there, it's another thing to stay there. And year in and year out, seemingly, or almost every year over the last quarter century plus, they're in the mix to win the Big Ten. And it almost is taken for granted at times how often they get into the NCAA tournament. A few years back, they had about everybody who could get hurt got hurt, and they didn't make the tournament that season. But otherwise, they've been in consistently since 1999. I mean, it's a short list of programs that can say that. And to have called a team in 3 Final Fours and 1 championship game, and the number of close games that they had to win to get there, and every game you're like this, right? And the players, from Michael Finley, Tracy Webster back in the early to mid 90s, to Devin Harris and Alonzo Tucker and Frank Kaminsky, obviously, been there's a lot of great players, but teams that have talked about being spoiled growing up. I think a lot of us have gotten spoiled watching the success of basketball now for 2.5 decades.
Close.
Can I give you one of my favorite teams, the late '90s, because and God bless them for having a sense of humor. Look at this, Trev. This is my favorite. This is from the shoebox. But it says, as it says on here, it says, John, need a good deal on shoes, call us, and it's signed by Mike Kelly and Andy Kowski. So those are my guys right there.
They are the best.
fact that they could go ahead and, find some humor in that bad boy, I still love them. So, yeah, those guys, the late 90s teams, and those guys, there were characters in all those guys, right? Like some of those guys were, like, I don't mind saying it, those clowns were entertaining.
Oh, they were, and they knew they got into the opponent's heads, especially the Kelly and Kowski and Vershaw, that group. I mean, look, the quick funny story: the year before, these guys, 99, were in the tournament. They were down in Charlotte, and they were playing, Southeast Missouri State, just called Missouri State now. Steve Alford was coaching. And it was one of those games where it was Murphy's Law. Wisconsin, their guys could not hit water from a boat. At halftime, it's 21-12. They're behind. So it's a little gallows humor my partner and I are having on when we thought we were in a commercial break. CBS had sent a stat guy over and wanted to know what the halftime score of the Rose Bowl game was earlier that past season, and it was 24-21. And so what's coming. The graphic that they're going to flash before the second half. So Mike and I are talking about how we wonder if the Badgers are going to come out here for the second half. Duke was also was scheduled to play later in that arena, and we're suggesting that maybe they're really intimidated. And it was just kind of, gallows humor. what we thought was between the two of us. Well, it wasn't. It got out over the air. It was written about. And I'm thinking, well, this will be a career ender. But those guys, the word got back, they laughed. He said, well, right. I would have said the same thing. It's 21-12. So they're into the following year. They beat Fresno State. They beat a top seed in Arizona. And they're being introduced in the Sweet 16. And Mike Kelly said after the game, he says, yeah, we're being introduced. And I'm talking to John Bryant, fellow guard who was great in that tournament. To look at us, a couple of slow dudes. We're playing in the Sweet 16. We're about to be introduced in the starting five. I mean, they took their craft seriously, but man, they did not take themselves seriously. They had a ton of fun, and probably had a lot to do with those guys getting to the Final Four.
Matt, it wouldn't take you long to listen to a broadcast and understand that you have a passion for Wisconsin. And recently, you've taken that passion into another area of UW with the initiative to end Alzheimer's with UW Health. Tell us about that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I lost my mom 4 years ago, both parents, but my mom dealt with Alzheimer's, and she died in July of 2017. And I thought, look, in my corner of the world with what I do, hopefully there's something that I can do to help get the word out, raise awareness, help raise money. They're doing a lot of great work at UW-Madison, the doctors, the researchers, and just in trying to find ways to at least slow down and ultimately be able to stop this awful disease. And one of the things that I discovered as I was going through this, watching my mom go through this, is that you don't have to go very far to find someone else, if it's a friend, an acquaintance, who's dealing with the same thing. So we've gotten involved, my wife and I, with the UW Foundation, the initiative to end Alzheimer's. And we in a normal year, we'll have in-person events, a lot of functions, fundraisers, that type of thing. Obviously, we've been limited to virtual, if at all, over the last year. But it's been humbling just to see the work that's being done. Very encouraging too. But you get humbled in a hurry because you find out that an awful lot of people out there have been dealing with this in their own families. So again, in my little corner here, if we can do something to help raise a couple of dollars and get awareness out, raise awareness, then that's something I want to do to honor my mom.
Worthy work. Thanks for doing it.
How do people help? How can we help?
Memoriesmatter.org for information, ways to donate. That would be the website, memoriesmatteruw.org.
Because I'm not so sure. Like there are diseases that are more painful physically, but I'm not so sure there's a crueler disease than that. You see people that lose things in the fire and they go, well, we lost this picture, but we always have our memories. And when you start to take those things away when it's hard, it's just it's unthinkably cruel how that happens when so many, especially as we talk about this in sports, and so much of this is based on things that you remember, those feelings you have, those memories you went through, those times you got goosebumps and sat in there and do those things. That's so much of what sports is those shared experiences and that shared memory of some of those things, whether you talk about the 96 team or the 05 team when you go through there. So
we'll wrap it up with Matt Lepay right after this. This is Inside Wisconsin.
Shut up and sit down.